Good morning. Welcome to the Top Women in Finance session. I hope everybody's having a great morning so far. My name's Jennifer Garbowitz, and I am the President's Council Representative, or PCR, for the Southeastern United States. And my role is really to facilitate communication and collaboration and serve as a liaison between the local CFA societies and the CFA Institute. My day job, though, is a volunteer position. My day job, where I actually earn money to pay my bills, I'm a principal at a company called Sable Trust Company, headquartered in St. Petersburg, Florida, and we provide trust and investment management services for private clients. My most important job, though, is taking care of my family. So I have a husband, a 7-year-old son, 5-year-old daughter, 5-year-old German Shepherd, and a very geriatric 10-year-old Chihuahua. So very busy. I'm joined here today by 3 very successful ladies that we're going to have the pleasure of hearing from. First is Linda-Eling. She's Managing Director and Global Head of ESG Research at MSCI. Brie Williams in the middle is VP, Head of Practice Management for the Global Spider business for State Street Global Advisors. And then Mary-Ellen Garrett is Senior Vice President, Wealth Management Advisor for the Garrett Group, Merrill, Lynch. So welcome to all of you. Thanks for being here. So today we're going to talk about diversity in the workplace, their experiences, and evolution of their careers, and what they think the future holds for our industry. So this should be a pretty fun discussion. So the first question is, let's start with the topic of diversity. We've already touched on it today. Bjorn talked a lot about it this morning in the opening session. And when we think of diversity, we can apply it to gender, to age, cognitive ability, life experiences, and so on. So the first question I want to pose, and we'll start with you, Linda, is how do you think diversity increases competitive advantage?
So thank you so much for having me here. Just by way of introduction, I am head of research for the Environmental, Social, and Governance Research Group at MSCI. Most of you will know MSCI as the index provider, but we also provide a lot of environmental, social, and governance information to global institutional investors. So a lot of my perspective today comes from some of the research that we have been doing, especially around women on boards and the relationship between diversity in leadership positions as well with company performance. And so, the question about, how is it that diversity has been bringing company performance, this is an area of research that we continue to do every single year. There are a couple of findings that we have been analyzing over the last couple of years that give us a little bit of a clue as to what is actually bringing to impact company performance. Number one is that it's not really necessarily about having one person's unique perspective that comes into a group. There is a lot of research now that we've also done to show that there is a critical mass that you kind of need, and there is, in a group setting such as a board setting, you need to have a tipping point of 3 or more women on the boards in order to bring that diverse perspective to bear, to have better board oversight. So that's one thing. And then additionally, we've been looking at the relationship between having diverse boards and the relationship between that and having stronger talent management practices. So, we have found that, if you have more diverse boards or you have better talent management practices, that you will have better company performance compared to companies that don't have either. However, it's the combination of the two that really gives you a much better boost in terms of your worker productivity relative to the industry. So I think it's this mosaic of different perspectives that you're bringing to a group at the leadership level, as well as in combination with everything else within the organization that is working in sync to actually push for better innovation and better performance in an organization. And that's my research hat.
And Brie, can you tell us a little bit about what you do at your firm, and then talk
Sure.
about...
So I run our practice management group, and at a simple level, we are responsible for business development and client engagement strategies and tactics for wealth management firms and financial advisors to improve their bottom line and improve the outcomes for the clients that they serve. This is a very timely conversation that we're having. It's a pleasure to be a part of it, and I agree with everything you've said regarding the mosaic. And if you just look at some of the data, what we're really talking about is a business case. And it's very clear that the solution is not looking at it as, you want a woman, I'll give you a woman. It's about the right person for the right job at the right time. But that critical mass and having a sustainable approach to talent development all the way up to the C-suite is essential. If you look at things in the big picture, if men and women contribute equally to the economy, then that's a $28 trillion boost to our global GDP. On a level, and I believe it's your data, the MSCI, 36% or more average return on equity for companies that have that mix of senior leadership with diversity, enough women, tipping the point, annual returns. Why would you not want that for your own bottom line? It takes time to get there, and progress needs to be made, and having the strong call to action of looking at corporate representation at the board level, because you need the top-down strategy, but you also have to be mindful of the pipeline. And when we look at financial services in particular, we have a real problem of holding on to our rising talent in the middle of the pyramid. And that is what's causing the stagnation of change when you get to the SVP level and higher. We're holding at anywhere between 16 and 23%, depending on the type of job you're talking about. And that needs to change, otherwise we're going to be still having this conversation in another 5 years. So we have to go beyond top.
And Mary-Ellen, we'd love to hear your perspective and how, how it's affected what you've done at your firm over the years.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for the invitation. And good morning, everybody. I'm Mary-Ellen Garrett, and I'm the managing partner of the Garrett Group at Merrill Lynch. I've been with Merrill Lynch for 35 years. I have a wonderful team. One of my partners is in the back row. You should be in the front row. It's my daughter. I'm going to cut her a little slack, though.
It's the mom voice talking. Yeah.
Patsy, thank you for being here. I have 7 people on my team. I'm a senior vice president. I have 2 additional advisors, along with Patsy, who is one of our team partners. We have 3 sales associates, client associates who work with us. We manage about $1 billion in assets, and we produce about $8 million in revenue. When I first started, I was I was the only woman in the Merrill Lynch Buckhead office when I first started. I certainly have the longest length of service. There have been a lot of women that have come and gone in our industry. And the numbers at our firm, we still are about 80-20, which is pretty interesting because it was about probably 90-10 when I first started. So we've made a little bit of progress, but not as much progress as I would like to see. Like you, I have always been very for the right person for the job. I've never felt like a female financial advisor. I have felt like a financial advisor. And the way that my team looks is there's a gentleman on my team who is 70. I'm in my mid-50s. And there is a younger gentleman who is in his early 40s. And Patsy, who, I can't tell your age either, can I? But our team looks like our clients. And so we have the clientele there, as you say, with your clients as well, I'm sure. We deal with high net worth individuals. We also have a niche market of investing for the nonprofit world. And that came from just the involvement that we have within the community. As far as the diversity on our team, I believe that when you have the right person and when you have a mix of people in the team, you offer so many different forms of interest and so many different perspectives on things. So I have been a proponent of diversity within the workforce as well as diversity within our clientele.
And we've already talked a little bit today about how research shows that diversity makes business sense and has a positive impact on the bottom line, yet we don't see a lot of successful women in wealth and asset management. So what do each of you think that the industry can do to retain these successful and ambitious women? You alluded to a little bit of a gap that happens kind of mid-career or even late career. And, what can leaders, especially, anybody in this room, both male and female, do to remove any of those obstacles that might be there for advancement for women? Linda or Brie?
Sure, I'll start. There are numerous factors that can be challenges, and far too many for us to talk about in this one session, but just to highlight two, it comes to the heart of our ability to stop operating in an echo chamber. So when we look to recruit talent, but we also look to tap someone on the shoulder for that next position, be it a stretch opportunity or someone who's 99% qualified to do the job, we have to look outside of our usual pools of consideration because we're continuing to move up the ladder, people that are like ourselves, and that's only giving us the same exact results that we just discussed. You have to be able to take a chance at looking at someone that is putting in not only the effort and the passion and the drive to raise their hand, but look at the candidate that's not raising their hand. There could be a confidence issue with that person. They may be not even aware that job opportunity is open. If we can be more transparent about career pathing and how someone got from point A to point B to point C, then people are going to be able to see the inspiration and aspiration and those qualities of different individuals and say, I can do that too. As opposed to, well, I didn't do this exact same step pattern, so therefore I don't qualify. A lot of individuals, men and women, more women than men, unfortunately will take themselves out of the running by not even trying for the opportunity. So we have a very bad habit as women of, I don't fulfill 90% of the requirements, so I'm not going to put myself out there. So we have to do a better job as individuals being comfortable failing up. And as managers, we have to do a better job of giving individuals with promising talent the chance to fail up. That doesn't mean putting them in situations where they're going to fall down and not recover, but opportunities to be thrown in the deep end without the swimmies, if you will. But it's an opportunity to shine or show someone, show a group that they actually are capable of handling it by just giving them the runway they need, the roadway ahead on how they can get there, and the rest will take care of itself. We just don't do that, unfortunately. I think the other roadblock is we've created less than gender neutral policies, simple things like the way you name leave, which is for most companies defined as maternity leave. More women step in and out of their careers over their lifetime, which takes them off the same track as their male counterparts when they started. Someone has to have the kids, and someone has to take care of them. That shouldn't penalize their career. So in financial advice in particular, if you're a solo practitioner and you step away for 3 months or 3 years, you're starting over because your clients aren't going to wait for you. I think teaming and other solutions are perhaps going to help with that. It allows that flexibility, but what women are asking for is not a special treatment or a new model. It's consideration of equal opportunity for equal work. And if we look at leave as family leave, not only will that encourage men and women to take the time they need to care for family when that's necessary and the leading winning priority of that particular time in their life, they're not going to necessarily be set aside when it comes to that next promotion opportunity or the clients that they serve, because there is a give and take in place for sustainable client service.
Yeah, you are so right.
Yeah, so we've been growing the ESG practice and really very quickly over the last couple of years, and we're a very global firm. And so the team that we have about 180 analysts, and they are in 15 different offices around the world. I always have a lot of people who are on maternity leave, and I spend a lot of time thinking about the gaps from a managerial perspective, but also in kind of bringing people back, and the fact that there are so many different leave policies around the world. So one of the things that our firm instituted last year was to put in a global policy so that there is actually a minimum global standard for maternity and paternity leave, because I think when teams work very closely together globally, it's just the inconsistency and the lack of fairness has been a little bit of an issue. In terms of what success looks like in terms of bringing people back into the team and having them be very, very productive, I think that what the policies matter a lot, but it's also the supportive environment that you really need. And and what the advice that I certainly give to many of the women on my team that have taken leave and come back is that you kind of have to pace yourself, and just the fact that they know and they've seen colleagues have a little bit of the ebb and flow as they kind of come in and out, it really helps, because it makes the women on the team not be so hard on themselves, the day they come back from work and they're not running at 120%, and that they know that they still will be able to contribute, at the levels that they did before they came back. I think that sort of informal environment really matters a lot. Recently I've had someone come back from maternity leave who is actually the only person, and it's a relatively small office in an emerging market, who didn't have anybody to look to, didn't have any colleagues who can actually role model for her what that might look like, a transition back. And that's a really challenging situation. And what we ended up doing was I actually got a group of female colleagues who have been through it to basically just call her, every other day to just check in and to let her know that her ups and downs every day coming back is normal. It's normal, and that she doesn't have to be so hard on herself. And someday, very soon, she will be, back up a top seat. And I think that sort of support matters for kind of getting women through the hump in that middle period. And just as the other part about the gender neutrality and also about generational issues. So probably, I would say 90%, if not more, of the team are millennials. And the really interesting thing is when we put in this global policy of maternity, paternity leave, I assumed and I expected that a lot of the women on the team would provide positive feedback. But actually the first person to come and say, wow, this was so hugely helpful and this is so great, was actually a male analyst on the team. We have several who are actually the primary caregivers because their partners are in jobs such as, they're surgeons. So, if the school calls and says, your kid has lice and come pick him up, it's going to be the male analyst and not their spouse who's in the operating room. Yes, I've had several, so I have my heart goes out to anybody whose kid has lice. I think that we're beginning to see the shift in the generation where the policies that we're thinking of that are really more aimed at women are actually hugely helpful also, I think, that for the male generation that's coming up.
I would add too, if you're in management, I would challenge you to think a little differently and think flexibly for your employees. If you're in production, finding a good partner or finding a good team is really going to be the key to your continuation. If you take a break for whatever reason it might be. My husband and I have been married 36 years, and when I first started at Merrill Lynch, I was an internal wholesaler, so I traveled all over the country. I had 3 children under 2. And I had a phone call with my husband one night. I don't remember what city I was in, and he said, Mary, we have to do something different. And I said, why? And he said, I had a presentation today. I walked in the boardroom, and the woman who was the CEO of the company looked at me with the strangest look on her face, and she kept staring at my shoulder. And he finally said, what? And she said, Mr. Garrett, you have a cookie stuck on the back of your jacket. And he said, I can't do this anymore. So I flew home, I went into my manager, I said, I need a job that keeps me here but is flexible enough that I can help with the kids. We've got all these kids, and what do we do? And that's one of the things where I'm shocked that there aren't more women in our industry because of the flexibility. You have so much flexibility when you're in production. You're responsible for adding business to your bottom line. And you've got to get that wherever it is. It's not a 9-to-5 job, as all of you in the room know. But when you're in a management position, also to think flexibly for your employees. I have one woman on my team who lives in Alabama, and she commutes and works out of our Columbus, Georgia office for us. Many of the clients don't even know. It's so seamless because she still keeps in touch. I have another woman who's been with me for 15 years, and Jackie works 4 days a week. She loves having her 3-day weekend. She gets as much done, if not more, in 4 days. I have another woman who was a financial advisor, wanted to take a different track in her career. She came into the group as a financial advisor, but she will become a client associate. She brings a whole different perspective. But she needed that flexibility and that job security in order to do that. Talking about maternity and paternity leave, one of my partners, his wife just had a baby last year, and we kept encouraging him to take time. And I don't know how many people encourage you to take time off, but every time he'd be in the office, we'd say, go home, take an extra day, go do. So find a group of people who think like you, and you can work with them and think flexibly, and you don't always have to follow what's in the box. Come up with some things yourself, and do it for the benefit of the others who are working with you, because they'll give back to you more than you can imagine.
Can I make a comment on
Sure.
that? So flexibility is definitely, I mean, I think that's, especially for the millennial generation, that is considered just basic human rights, I think. And so I think that's just, but I think I would caution against, for women, against too readily taking up the part-time option. And I've had to personally kind of talk several people on my team out of that, because I can show them, because what we do is research the productivity and so forth is really readily apparent, and I can show them that they're producing just as much as somebody else who's working 5 days a week, so they're just being paid part-time for full-time work, right? And so we know that a lot of women and people in general who are very ambitious, they will continue to deliver. So even though they've condensed themselves to either the 3-day week or the 4-day week, they actually are delivering on a 5+ day schedule. So why not show that this is actually your productivity, this is actually the value you're delivering, and you should get paid for all of that, and not really limit yourself to just your 80% of your pay.
Smart.
So that's my.
Smart.
Yeah, that's mindful management right there. And we don't do enough of that. And we also don't practice what we preach. So you can have every wonderful policy known to man, but if no one follows it from the top down, then it's very uncomfortable for a employee underneath that particular regime, if you will, to take it. Because there's an unsaid message there, which is, it's here, but we don't do that. So the mindful management, I think, can go a lot farther in following what we put out on the table for everyone else to eat by actually doing it and showing that that individual, the team, can be successful with the flexibility and the fluidity of how they get the job done. Because if you're still performing, to your point, it's equal pay for equal work. And then it is the flexibility that they need to balance the two priorities in their life, work and family, which will make them happier and more likely to stay with you for the long haul or with that company. Or I think you have a great example where you raised your hand and said, I'm looking for something else because I have to reprioritize personally, and I'm hoping we can work something in my favor, but also in your favor in terms of a company. That can be a tough conversation for someone to come to the table with. And we have to make the environment comfortable enough to let someone speak their mind and put that out there as, is this an option? Versus just not seeing it and then walking away, which is part of the reason why we have a high attrition rate of many women leaving the industry when they start to prioritize family. They don't necessarily feel welcomed back or see a path back because we haven't communicated it.
Very good points. And I think we can probably, everybody in the room can agree that none of us got to the point that we are today without the help of others. And so that leads me to kind of another question for you is, what role have mentors, or even further than that, sponsors, played in the development of your careers? You know, how have you been helped by others, both male and female, in that regard?
I'd be happy to start that. My mentors have changed over the years. I've had several when I first started who were some of the older gentlemen in my firm who I still keep in touch with, who have been retired now for, in some cases, decades. But I look to mentors for somebody who can teach me something. So a lot of my mentors today are the millennials. And they're doing something that I don't know how to do. That I'm still ambitious enough, I'm still excited enough about learning something new, that I find people who are open to be able to teach me something, and not feeling like you know it all, because you never do, and in so many cases I feel like a rookie. It's because you're constantly learning things over and over. The gentleman who spoke earlier this morning talking about the Quotron that you shared with the 4 people and you turned it to get the GE quote, I do remember that. But that's been a really good thing. The other part about it, our team is very involved in the community. And I take a big cue from a lot of the nonprofits that I work with as mentors. I see the effect that they're having in the community, and I see the help that we can give them by sitting on their boards, by participating and by volunteering, and just by being involved. And so those are some of the mentor relationships that I have today.
I think mentorship's important and critical, but I think in order to rise in the pipeline, especially in management, you need a sponsor or sponsors. And I think you need, both from the mentorship level and coaching, as well as your sponsor, men and women in the mix, because we learn from not only people in different seats, but their backgrounds. So if my family bet all the money they had on whether I'd be in finance and up here today, we would have all lost, because I did not start out in finance at all. My career began in advertising, and I spent 12 years on that path, loved every minute of it, and then through fate, someone had tapped me on the shoulder and said, you would be really amazing for this opportunity, but it's in finance. Are you willing to do it? I said, well, I'll have the conversation, and you should always have the conversation, even if you're happy as a clam. And that's what changed my fate in terms of why I'm up here today. The sponsors in that process of getting you from point A to point B are critical. And the difference between a mentor and a sponsor is that sponsor wears your brand, is of influence, that they have the ability to put your name out there when the decisions are being made or in considerations for stretch assignments, promotions, and they're willing to do that for you. It's not an easy thing to get a sponsor, and it's something that you have to work at. I've had men and women be sponsors. I've also had points in my career where I haven't had a sponsor, and that has hurt me. So you can work as hard as humanly possible and pull in amazing results, but you do need someone advocating for you on your behalf. And that makes a difference, I think, as an industry. We can open our eyes to that, where as men and women, we have to look for that next best talent, not just those that are raising their hand, and encourage them and put their name out there. I just did it for one of our junior members of my team. She's 8 months on the job, and we have this national sales meeting coming up next month. And we do this fun spider talk feature for 10 minutes where they share their personal story. There's probably around 400 of us in the room. I put her up for that. So talk about being thrown in the deep end without swimmies. But I did it because she's going to prove to herself that she can. because I actually need her in the field. So this is a safe environment for her to try, but also to show everyone she's ready.
I always find this question really hard because I think I'm missing something. Because I don't totally understand the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. I feel like I have been very lucky that I've had really good bosses. And I think all the things that people talk about in terms of people advocating for you, or people who have helped me sort of navigate the organization, they've typically come from kind of my sort of direct managers, and I've done the same sort of thing for the people in my group. And so I think that the formal managerial channels have actually worked for me at least. Where I do think, especially kind of as I get more senior in an organization, in terms of just thinking about organizational problem solving, where I really find a lot of value is actually talking to people outside of my organization and what I do, and actually I'm increasingly needing to find people who are sort of at the same levels, but in different institutions, and maybe even in different industries, because I find that hearing other people's problems help me solve my own so much better than if I went and targeted, said I wanted to do this or I wanted to do that, or I'm trying to solve this or that. I have found that over the last couple of years that some of the advancements and some of the breakthroughs have come when I've heard other people talk about kind of their problem and how they're solving it in their own organizations, in their own kind of organizational context. So just maybe like putting my head in a different place has been really helpful for me.
So in thinking about all that we've talked about so far, because we're kind of coming to the end here, where do we go from here? Where do you see us as an industry in 10 years and in 20 years if we can sort of implement some of the things that we've talked about today and move forward with a lot of these ideas?
Last week I was at a conference that was in South Florida, and we had a wonderful group of speakers, and one of the sessions was called "What Got You Here Won't Take You There," and which I thought was pretty interesting. And they talked about all of the what we did to build our businesses up to this point, but that it has to be a little different going forward. I would argue that just a little bit, because I do think the gentleman who spoke this morning had it completely right, where listening is one of the biggest things when you're dealing with individuals in our business. And so I don't think that part is going to change. I think the way that we are presenting to our clients is certainly going to change. It might not be the one-page proposal that he talked about or the 30-page proposal. I think it's something in between. I think it's something that you have to gauge your listener, you have to gauge your client and know what they are going to need going forward. And I like it the old-fashioned way. I like to be in front of my clients. If there's a problem, I like to head it off at the pass and take the difficult calls first. If the markets are going down and you have a half a dozen clients who are the nervous Nellies that call you up, call them first. It's going to help them sleep better at night. It's going to help you sleep a little bit better at night. So much of I think much of the same with, again, listening and just making sure you know what your clients need.
I would say we have to think carefully about what our reputation is as an industry broadly. Because if you think about yourself, how did you end up in the seat you're in? If we're talking about pursuing the path of helping someone on their financial journey as a wealth manager, financial advisor, most people haven't been exposed to that type of individual unless their parents introduced them when they were still in the home. Like, I had absolutely no idea what a financial advisor was until Fidelity was one of my clients in marketing. And at that point, I was almost 30. So the opportunities of what wealth management in any type of seat, whether it's portfolio construction, it's in a new space such as ESG, wealth management in terms of helping people achieve the dreams they want in their financial life, there's so many paths. But we let mass media shape what the world thinks of us, which isn't a good reflection right now. So really young men and women deserve the opportunity by us telling them what this career offers, including its social purpose, the opportunities that are available, the many different pivots that you can take even once you jump in and choose financial services. Because if we don't fix and educate around what this career path can be about and inspire the next generation of talent to come in this direction outside of the traditional B school student, then we're only hurting ourselves, because we're going to continue to operate in that echo chamber, where in liberal arts there's many wonderful people that have the skills that we need. I know you opened up this with Carl Richards on behavioral finance. The EQ component of our industry is essential. Human plus bot, but the EQ is necessary in order for us to disrupt and root out the bias that can often hold us back in some of our own decision making, including the decisions you make for yourself. And if we can change that and make ourselves a little uncomfortable and do a better job promoting what we're all about, I think we'll see a shift in the type of talent that want to be in the seats you're sitting in.
So looking forward, I mean, I'm always a little bit torn, because in terms of the progress, we're actually not making as much progress as you sort of think that we would, because we're talking about it so much. I mean, when we run the numbers and we've sort of projected at which point you're going to get 30% board representation, female board representation, that's actually slowed over the last 2 years. So 2 years ago, when we did this calculation for MSCI equity companies, it was going to be 2027. And now it's going to be 2028. So despite all of this attention to it, somehow the progress is slowing. On the other hand, I do think that something we haven't talked about here is large institutional investors that are putting money where their mouth is, if you will, right? So they have really, we've seen allocations to mandates that track indexes that reward companies, if you will, or incentivize companies that are actually making progress, that actually have these more progressive policies, and they're quite substantial allocations, and so I think that that's starting to make its way in terms of at least making the investment industry pay much more attention to this area, and actually looking at the companies in their portfolios to see where they stand when it comes to gender diversity. So I think it's possible that through that dedicated effort, if you will, and capital to really incentivize companies, that we would actually make much better progress over the next 10 years.
Linda, Brie, Mary Ellen, thank you so much for a great conversation. I know we're running a little bit behind schedule today. Do we have time for a couple of questions? Okay, we do. Anybody have questions? Aradhana?
So the Me Too movement is very much here. What do you see as the implication if there is a backlash or anything negative from that? So there's a lot of talk, as you just talked about, but do you think there would be a backlash in the industry for women because of that?
May I
Please.
You know, I think, and just from personal experience, whenever I'm training some of the younger groups that come on, I always do this to them. I always tell them to put your blinders on and just go to work. Just work hard, put your head down. The Me Too movement is certainly part of today's environment, and what I heard at this conference last week was that there were some people who were afraid to mentor. And you hear it in Washington, and you hear it in the different industry groups, and I just feel that that's one of the potential backlashes, that you're going to miss some really wonderful potential mentors because they're worried about what might happen. Instead of being worried about what might happen, just be smart. And if you're uncomfortable on a one-on-one situation, bring somebody with you. You know, bring a group with you. Make it a group mentor program instead of a one-on-one program. But you know, there may be some backlashes there, but I don't think it's going to change things too much for that good old-fashioned hard work. So I hope that That's my opinion.
I would just add to that is you can always turn a negative into a positive if you're willing to learn from it. I think the conversations are now out in the open, which is where they need to be, because it's not a new issue, unfortunately. And we can take it as an opportunity to show how we're going to be better for men and women in the career, so they can be not only comfortable and feel like they belong, but thrive. And in the process, those that aren't willing to follow best practices and be smart, then they don't deserve the seat they have.
It's just to echo the positive point, if you will. I suppose most of the questions that I've gotten around Me Too has to do with sort of ESG analysis, because of course we rate companies on their human capital management. And I do feel like investors are paying much more attention to how well, whether it's boards or human capital policies, are protecting companies from these types of vulnerabilities, and whether or not they have scandals brewing. Those are the kinds of things that a lot more portfolio managers are actually paying attention to. And so, for us, it's really more about kind of fielding questions around how you actually can assess companies from an external point of view on how robust their human capital management policies are.
Thank you. And I think, Kathy, you had a question?
Thank you very much. So I've been in the business for a long time, and it was always okay for me to be late to work because my car wouldn't start, but not because I had to take my kids to the doctor. I would never go in the coffee room and say, gosh, I'm not going to be 100% because my kid wouldn't sleep last night. But the normalization of men talking like this in my office just staggers me. These men who are like in their 30s are walking around Ruben and talking about how, God, these kids are really hard. And I'm like, thank God. And what I want to encourage in large organizations is to just bring these conversations into the daily workplace. I'm sorry, I'm going to be 45 minutes late. I take my kid to the office. I'm going to miss open. Can you cover for me? I mean, it's just this normalization that it's okay to bring family conversations into the office. But I think it's helping to change my very traditional workplace where you would never talk like that before. And I don't know how that works in large organizations that you're talking about. I mean, can you walk in and say, hey, you got bark on your shoulder?
It was a cookie. I hope so. I've found the conversation is very different than it used to be, and it is very open and very accepted. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I do think that the conversation is acceptable now. And it's okay to have these discussions that are open like this. Do you two find the same thing?
Yeah, I think so, and I think I do think it's partly generational. I do think that your 35-year-old guy with 2 kids at home who didn't sleep, he will come back. He will come in and share. You'll know about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the environmental factors that shape all of us. So regardless of which generation you're from, what you're exposed to in your experience, you bring to work. And if it is a more communicative family and money's talked about openly, then you carry that with you. If you were always taught that, girls don't get dirty, then that's what you believe. And neither one is right or wrong, but it's what you were exposed to. But the good news is environmentally, we all have power to change that. And it's just conditioning, but it's rooted in bias. So we can change the folklore by talking about new truths and create a new narrative by talking openly about the experiences that men and women across different generations have with family and work. And what we all come for is the results. And as long as we're delivering those results, then that type of environment should absolutely be encouraged, and that flexibility is deserved and should be put to work just as much as the numbers that you're accountable for on the spreadsheet.
Well, I think that all ties in really nicely with what Carl was talking about earlier this morning, and the human factor and listening and empathy and maybe the more human we can all be with each other, even at work, maybe that's what changes the industry, and maybe that's how we go forward. So I think we're out of time. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here and for being a part of the conversation, and thanks for having me.